all have any guns?
Adventure Time not only ushered in a wave of fresh new creator-driven cartoons that continues to this day, but it also offered characters and worlds presented in a style all its own. During its first 5 seasons, the series only got better over time, despite a few bumps in the road, winning over fans of all ages in the process. But the series would continue on for roughly twice that time, despite many slowly losing interest. In my opinion, the decline of the series began around the midpoint of Season 5, where energetic and intriguing tales were replaced with ones filled with exposition, forced plot points, out-of-place drama, and characterization that made little sense. Like why make Jake, one of the main characters in a show called Adventure Time, want to lie around rather than go on adventures? But I feel that the worst the show had to offer began in the next season. Wake Up and Escape from the Citadel kicked off Season 6, and for whatever reason, Cartoon Network chose to advertise the special with a promo that featured Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin.
The cats in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when.
12:30.
But we'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then.
Cool.
This show had a lot of memorable advertising in its time, but this one really takes the cake. Anyway, what was probably the series' best two-parter brought about some of the biggest moments so far. The Lich appeared to be defeated once and for all, we met Finn's dad Martin, who was revealed to be a deadbeat criminal, and Finn's arm was finally ripped off. A moment the show had been building to for ages, one that is fittingly emphasized with a whip crack sound effect. The loss and disappointment Finn suffers felt more realistic than anything he had previously encountered. This could have been a real turning point for the series. It could have transitioned into telling bigger and more mature stories, but it didn't. Adventure Time decided to stick to its status quo, and began to decline even further as a result. This season felt like the writers were constantly playing a game of drop ball, because boy did they constantly drop the ball. While I do really enjoy the episode where Finn learns to come to terms with the kind of person that his father is, Martin doesn't appear again until halfway through the season, and at that point, his character loses a lot of the initial impact he had on both Finn and the audience. They do a similar thing with the threat of the Catalyst comet having a fake-out appearance before it makes its official arrival at the end of the season. And they also finally reveal that Susan Strong is human after teasing it way back in Season 3. I know that you would have been able to come to that conclusion if you were paying attention, but for years it was officially left unanswered until now, where it's revealed with very little fanfare. As decent as those arcs may be, the episodes where they become important are too spread out to keep the momentum of their plots going. Finn's arm actually stays lost for a couple of episodes in the season. That is, until Breezy, an episode that shares two common traits with the B-movie: heavily implied sexual tension and... No, seriously, I'm not joking.
We're taking this to the deep end. But I'm not a good swimmer. Don't be scared, Finn. Lumpy's on lifeguard duty.
It will be one thing if Breezy was just a mildly disturbing episode, but it's plot relevant. Breezy the Bee turns into this monstrosity and magically turns Finn's arm back to normal. I hear it might have been a Cartoon Network mandate for Finn's design to stay consistent, but was this really the best way to handle it? To me, Breezy just makes little sense, both on a basic story level and on an overall plot level. And with most people I've asked, it was one of the last episodes they watched before they dropped the show. I know that it did kind of mark the point where I started to keep up with the premieres of new episodes less and less. Not only did the show begin to suffer from large hiatuses in its airing schedule, breaking its decent flow of pacing that made it easy to get into, but episodes just started to go nowhere. Did you want to see James come back? Did you want to see Jake's ass save an abused circus squirrel? Did you want to see Jake transform into a money-hungry jerk for 11 minutes? No? Well, someone thought that they were good ideas. What bugs me the most about this season is the super inconsistent tone it creates for the show. There are plenty of episodes that harken back to the feel of the past few seasons, and many of those are pretty decent. I like some of the offerings in the back half of the season. There's the only Grables episode that I think is above average, since I like how it ties in its short stories with a plot. Finn and Princess Bubblegum hang out as friends in a pretty chill episode, and there's a string of fairly good episodes all revolving around Jake. including one where Billy West guest stars for the sole purpose of making lots of references to Futurama, which I approve of. But these episodes are surrounded by ones with melancholy tones and frequent philosophical musings.
I remember feeling like someone had peeled a layer away from my brain, and my reality was no longer anchored to any point of reference. And I had to fight to keep from being crushed under the weight of an unforgiving new paradigm of ultimate reality.
The episode Ocarina has Jake's son kick his own father out of his house just to teach him a vague lesson, and it feels like Finn and Jake are just completely powerless against this businessman. It's all played completely straight too, and feels very drab as a result. Another episode in the season, Jermaine, does a similar kind of concept a lot better, and manages to be very entertaining as well, and for me it's the highlight of the season. Though in the defense of Ocarina, for whatever reason, it's one of the best looking episodes of the show. It's got this one sequence in a whole different art style, they created new and brought back character designs just for this one shot, and some of the lighting and angles are just beautiful. I don't know why the episode looks so good, but it just does. It goes to show that the artists and animators were still trying their hardest to make the show look good, and I appreciate that now more than ever. Some episodes get so wrapped up in themselves that they start to feel a little pretentious. I don't especially like using that word to criticize, but I do think it applies when talking about The Mountain. I have seen this episode multiple times, and I cannot figure out what is going on just a basic level. And I've yet to see anyone explain it without it sounding like an overcomplicated fan theory. I'm fine with cartoons tackling huge topics, but Adventure Time takes itself so seriously when it attempts to be quote-unquote deep. It forgets how silly the show really is at its core, and tries to spread all these big messages without a hint of irony and bare amounts of comedy. To illustrate my next complaint with the season, I've decided to bring in a good friend of mine to read a plot synopsis for the episode Orgolorg. Take it away, Timmy!
Gunter has strange visions after an accident. It is revealed that Gunter is really Orgolorg, a primordial chaos demon that once terrorized a faraway system of planets. After angering Abraham Lincoln, the king of Mars, Orgolorg was defeated by Grob Gob Glob Grob and banished to Earth. The planet's gravity compressed the being into a penguin, and for thousands of years he wandered for most of human history until finally being taken in by the Ice King. Never ask me for anything ever again.
No information at all was left out of that description. Someone thought that this would be a great plot twist for the season finale to revolve around. I'm really not a fan of how they decided to overcomplicate simple parts of the series lore like this, along with how Jake's shape-shifting powers come from the fact that he's half alien. To be honest, I do like the season finale Hot Diggity Doom and the Comet, mostly for shaking up the recent status quo, the action, and for putting an end to Finn's arc with his dad. But I like it the most for kind of marking the end of this philosophical and draining tone for the show. I was just relieved to be done with season 6 when rewatching it, and I can see why I didn't even bother finishing it all upon first watch. At the time, the only thing that honestly made me want to stick with the show was because I was still enjoying Adventure Time's world and characters. At least in comic form. I know that's a very odd explanation, but it is the truth. The main line of comics gave me all the comedy and fun adventure I wanted out of the show, when the actual show was giving me very little of that. And I would highly recommend the first 35 to 50 issues. I'd love to talk about them more sometime, because they're not only good Adventure Time stories, but good comic books too. Anywho, there is a whole lot more to the season than the problems I've been highlighting, and most of the episodes are about on par with the latter half of season 5. It's just the poor storyline management and tonal issues that really get me down with the season. And I would highly recommend that you just skip most of it. From episode to episode, it feels like an entirely different show, and in comparison to the rest of the series, this season feels very self-contained, and does little to move the basic plot forward. Believe it or not, with all the episodes in the season that just really rub me the wrong way, I've yet to even mention my least favorite episode, Water Park Prank. Adventure Time's guest-directed episodes are a bit of a mixed bag. They're not all great, but most of them are really interesting experiments to watch. But not only does Water Park Prank not feel like an Adventure Time episode in the slightest, but just stare at the first few moments of this episode.
These anti-fog goggles work a treat.
Yeah, but now they stink of dog breath.
Yeah, I think it's finally time to move on to season 7.
Let's go in the garden. You'll find something waiting right there where you left it, lying upside down.
Cartoon Network kinda messed around with the episode order from this point onward, and turned the last 2 or 3 seasons into 4, so the seasons feel less coherent as a result. I'll just be talking about the seasons within the new order to keep things from getting too complicated. Season 7 isn't quite what the show needed after suffering a big decline in both ratings and fan interest. The season seemed to be business as usual in a lot of ways, and kind of went back to what had worked for the show in the past, though it did begin to slowly work to something bigger, something that would help Adventure Time rise back up from its fall. The first 5 episodes start to course correct from prior mistakes. They're much more lighter and focused on comedy and character development rather than just trying something new for the sake of attempting to keep the show fresh. They don't do too much with how con artist the King of Ooh has taken over the Candy Kingdom, but they do a decent job of showing how corrupt of a ruler he is in the background of a few episodes. A lot of the season is good, but not great, and a handful of episodes are a little too silly or simple, like Scamps, or even the guest-directed Bad Jubies. The episode President Purpose is Missing doesn't even have an ending and meanders around for most of its runtime, making it the weakest offering here in my opinion. The season is at its best when focusing on more mysterious episodes, like the offbeat Blank-Eyed Girl, the philosophical yet still lighthearted The More You Mow, The Mo You Know, I hate saying that title, and King's Ransom, which is a pretty underrated Ice King episode. The main event of the season is Stakes, Adventure Time's very first miniseries. Getting a load of new story-driven episodes all at once is what really got me back into the show. The miniseries are, by and large, the very best thing that the show did during the back half of its run. They revolved around events that factored into the series' lore a whole lot, and we were able to get a self-contained story arc without the long breaks that it would typically have on the show. There are some pacing problems with jokes that go nowhere, and things wrap up a little too nicely, but the vampire fighting, overall style, and tidbits into Marceline's backstory made this a great experience for longtime fans. Everything Stays is one of the best songs in the whole show too, and it makes me glad that the writers didn't really try to replicate the style of Rebecca Sugar's songs after she left, because it makes the few that we get now even more special. Season 7 is finished off with a string of episodes where things just start getting great again. Crossover is probably the dumbest excuse for an episode, as it really only serves to give an in-universe reason for an animation error from the Season 5 premiere. However, the episode had me on the edge of my seat the whole time, and it completely makes up for its lackluster premise. My favorite from the season, The Hall of Egress, is another strong contender for one of the series' best, and I love how it gives Finn an unusually difficult challenge, capped off with a strong ending.
Whoa! That must have been some cave.
No comment!
Season 7 isn't the complete 180 the show needed after it hit the bottom of the barrel, but it still offers a lot of good and great episodes while giving the show momentum and a fun attitude again. Quite a few of the episodes are about on par with the average episodes of Season 6 in my eyes, but there's still a handful of standout episodes that constantly fire on all cylinders, and those really make the season a little more than just an average one. Around this time, Cartoon Network kind of stopped advertising Adventure Time on air, and they only made a big deal about the show when they announced that it was going to be coming to an end. For the next 2 years, they pretty much pretended that it didn't exist, and that led to everyone outside hardcore fans thinking that it was quietly cancelled. Adventure Time had already been around for 6 whole years, and in that time, quite a few series had come into the spotlight on the channel. I don't blame Cartoon Network at all for wanting to move on to new things. Despite it regaining my interest, even I was starting to focus my attention elsewhere, and you can even see that with the small amount of coverage it received on this channel. It's a shame that the show had completely overstayed its welcome at this point, because despite Season 8 getting really wrapped up in callbacks to things that happened like 100 episodes ago, I think this season is pretty fantastic. Not only do we once again begin to get deeper into some of the characters while still getting fun and entertaining adventures, but there's finally a move to more coherent story arcs. There's still standalone episodes here and there, but many of them bring back characters like James Baxter or develop Jake's kids, something that was a refreshing course correction from the downright out-of-character idea that Jake would be the kind of person to completely avoid raising his kids in any way. Finn also officially loses his arm and has it replaced with a robot one, which finally brings a lot of previous foreshadowing full circle and shows that the series is willing to take risks with its cast again. At the same time, the episode Bun Bun finally gives closure to Finn's relationship with Flame Princess, as well as with Cinnamon Bun's sudden transformation into her serious servant, and Elemental and Jelly Beans Have Power serve as prologues to the next season's miniseries. One of the bigger events is a set of episodes that build to the Finn sword getting destroyed and merging with Finn's grass sword. This in turn leads to the creation of Fern, a clone of Finn with all the same memories, but a slightly different moral compass. Fern is interesting as a twisted reflection of our hero, someone tasked with being something he's not, and not being able to handle failure. I really liked what they've done with him in the remainder of the series thus far. Capping off Season 8 is the Islands miniseries, an arc dedicated to finally explaining the whereabouts and culture of the humans of Earth and Finn and Susan Strong's connection with them, and it barely disappoints. It's got a great ending, a really cool credit sequence, and my favorite episode in the season, Min and Marty, a thoroughly heartbreaking love story that shows the beginning and the end of the relationship between Finn's parents. It's also got the low point of the season, Wimple the Happy Dragon.
Whipple, you suck so much.
An episode that feels like a culmination of random ideas that didn't quite make it into the other episodes. Islands is probably the worst of the 3 miniseries because of a few episodes that stand out a bit too much from the rest of the storyline, but it's only the worst out of 3 really solid parts of the show. Season 8 is honestly up there with Season 3 as one of Adventure Time's very best seasons in my opinion. Not because its episodes are necessarily as good, but the way it starts to wrap up loose ends, undo poor story decisions, and finally delve into serialized stories helps to give it even more life.
We've lost another friend at Choose Goose.
There's no point in having friends, because everything will end.
These two make up short 14 and 16 episode seasons by themselves, so for the sake of convenience, I'm just going to talk about them together. After Orb, the weakest offering from Season 9 that really doesn't offer too much other than foreshadowing and neat visuals, we get the final and my personal favorite miniseries, Elements. Out of everything this set of episodes does, and all the bizarre new things it does with the characters and world, the thing I like about it the most is the character dialogue. Pairing Finn up with Jake, Lumpy Space Princess, or Ice King just results in some of the best interactions from the whole show.
Do you do squats?
I can also commend Elements for having repercussions that lead into the home stretch of episodes, like having Jake come to terms with his alien origins. It still kind of bugs me that it was resolved in just one episode, but the episode itself, titled Abstract, captures Jake's realization about himself so very well during his speech at the end.
There's some stuff about me that I've been ignoring for a long time. I'm afraid of that stuff, but it's part of who I am. As long as I know the shape of my soul, I'll be all right.
This arc doesn't completely end here either, because in Season 10's Jake the Star Child, Jake discovers that he has an alien father who takes him in and seems welcoming at first, but then ends up stealing Jake's powers to extend his own, and Jake can only defeat him by outsmarting him. In other words, yes, I did like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I'm pretty sure the similarities are a coincidence, since the series finale was recorded months before the movie premiered, but despite the comparison, I still think the arc caps off Jake's character in an exciting way, and I love how it essentially ends with Jake sacrificing himself for the safety of his children.
If you destroy me, you'll be stuck on that rock forever!
My pups are worth it!
Jake's had so many near-death experiences, including this one, throughout the series, so I'll be very surprised if he doesn't die in some way during the series finale. Season 9 ends with my favorite episode from the season, 3 Buckets, where Finn's relationship with Fern reaches a breaking point, and Finn more or less watches himself die right in front of his own eyes.
I know that look. You just killed someone.
This season finale also formally introduces Uncle Gumball, the head of a failed experiment by Princess Bubblegum to start a family. The episode that details this backstory is one I find very impressive, as it almost strictly uses locations and tidbits from previous episodes to weave its plot, with none of them feeling forced in the slightest. It gives off the feeling that this plot point is something so much of the series has been building up to, but it really doesn't feel like that. I love that Adventure Time finally has an ever-present antagonist instead of one who shows up and then disappears for huge stretches of episodes, but my question is, why now? Why is this the series endgame? This conflict feels like one that would have been more fitting in the middle of the series, not at the end of it, since Gumball has only been barely alluded to prior to his debut. Shouldn't the Lich or someone more powerful be the antagonist at this point? For all I know, that might end up being the case, and many suspect that the being Gull will be at the center of the series finale. But even if that ends up being the case, it doesn't feel like it's been set up that way. Like, I bet most of you don't even know who Golb is, and that's because he's barely shown up, and he's only been hinted at being ultra powerful, and we really haven't seen him do anything significant. In this way, I'm pretty worried for what's to come. but otherwise I do enjoy the episodes in the season that act as last hurrahs for the supporting cast, even though there isn't too much of a sense of finality to be found in them. This is because the arcs for most of the characters have already had time to conclude. But as far as just giving these characters one more go in the spotlight, they get the job done. Speaking solely of the quality of each episode, these 2 seasons are still really great, and episodes like Always BMO Closing show how funny and creative the show can still be.
It's Ice King.
I know.
The weakest link from Season 10 for me is 17. The heroes just become super oblivious all of a sudden, and it seems like they either wait for the worst moment to attack, or just don't try at all. Not a bad episode, but one that's a little weaker than its brethren. One neat addition I admire that comes to center stage during episodes in the last few seasons are subtle themes relating to the end of the show. Creators moving on to new things, and fans taking influence from their creations or taking up their mantle altogether are all ideas that come up in episodes like Fiona and Cake and Fiona or Bananas, and it's one of the very few instances of meta-level commentary in the show. Even though I know a Flash animated reincarnation titled It's Adventure Time is written on a post-it note somewhere at Cartoon Network, the current crew of the series makes it very clear that they don't want to see the show have any sort of major reboot in the future.
I think I just wanted to be part of Blah. It's something I've been a fan of for so long. And maybe we can bring it back. There's no reason it can't have a new dawn. A Blenizance.
Okay, boys, close it down!
No, you're right. Can't be nostalgic.
Season 10 is a bit scattershot, since it has the task of trying to get the show to end on a high note. But the penultimate episode, Gumbaldia, is the highlight of the season for me. I love how we see both Bubblegum and the Gumbaldians working towards their collision. As the sense of danger increases, it becomes all too clear that war is coming, and Finn and Jake can't really do anything about that. I have high hopes for the final episodes set to put an end to the series, which fall under the title Come Along With Me, named after the opening lyric to the series' ending theme. These last 4 outings have yet to air as of writing this video, and it's been almost 6 months since the last proper episode. That's not counting the decent but untimely Minecraft crossover special, which I did cover in a separate video, but I'm super excited to see what will come of the last hurrah. Recently, Adventure Time has had great luck with longer form stories, though I have almost no clue as to what's gonna happen. I doubt we're going to get the most satisfying conclusion possible in only 4 episodes. Like, I don't think all 900 plus characters will have especially happy endings, but at the very least, we'll get a cool new Rebecca Sugar song out of it, who came back to the show just to write one.
Time is an illusion that helps things make sense, so we're always living in the present tense. It seems unforgiving when a good thing ends, but you and I will always be back then. You and I will always be back then.
I think Adventure Time has really earned its spot as one of Cartoon Network's most important shows, and perhaps even one of its best as well. At its best, it was a shining beacon of creativity, energy, and a unique brand of storytelling that nearly everyone can enjoy. There's a whole lot of disappointing storylines and episodes that fell flat or didn't quite work as well as they could have, but in the grand scheme of things, they ended up being a very tiny part of the series, and at its worst, it was still a feast for the eyes and ears. Because of its unique style of pacing, you'll have to be extraordinarily patient and watch it like no other show, but what the show achieved was worth the wait. I'll never forget all the little details that only this show could bring to the table. How it was able to both rise and fall in quality, though not quite in that order, the best title cards the show has ever had, and of course the experience I had after watching Kingworm. I will never forget that. It's gonna be weird to live in a world where I can no longer look forward to new episodes of Adventure Time. But it will live on, not only in the shows produced by former crew members, but also in the work that came from the generation that grew up on it. I'm not sure I would be quite as passionate about animation if this series hadn't come along to get me hooked on Cartoon Network's lineup. Even though the adventure might be over, its spirit will live on. The fun will never end.
It would look like will happen, happening, happened, will happen, happening, happened, and will happen again and again. 'Cause you and I will always be back then. 'Cause you and I will always be back then. 'Cause you and I will always be back then. That's why you and I will always be best friends.